Very happy to be here. Not that I'm counting, but it's been roughly 7 months and 18 days. But I'm very happy to be your state treasurer. I certainly am pleased with the opportunity to come and visit with you guys today, and I'll answer some of your questions. I think everybody's relieved that the sessions are finally over, and I say sessions with a S, plural. And, you know, I've told people we may not have all agreed, but, you know, it's over. We have a budget, and it's time to move on and look at some of the issues facing the state. You know, we did make some positive steps forward. We obviously have a balanced budget. We had a surplus, and I'd suspect we probably will have a surplus at the end of the fiscal year that just finished. Our fund balances are up over $1 billion now compared to 2 years ago. And of course, we didn't have to use RANDs like we did 2 years ago. So there are some positive things happening in Louisiana. I would say sometimes this process seemed a little negative, but I tell people it is a process. You know, when you look at the legislators and to make up their districts and where they're from, and then look at their vote, I think in most cases their vote represents their district. I don't think it's so much politics. There's a lot of people like to make a big story out of that, but I don't see that. I think generally legislators represent their districts and do so accordingly. Oh, my sticky fingers aren't working. One of the things that happened in a session that I supported a lot, and I talked a lot about during the campaign, is that you know, I think people have lost faith in this process, and one of the ways we can sort of turn that tide is through transparency. And transparency, as you know, became the big buzzword during the session, and I was glad to see that the transparency bill passed, and we'll see how that gets implemented moving forward. I know my office is involved in that, and I'm very much looking forward to participating in that. I would say that the fiscal cliff was mainly solved, not mainly, the fiscal cliff was solved on the revenue side, and now that the pressure's off, I'd say now it's time to get to work and look at the spending side. You know, many of you know that I authored the legislation that created the task force a couple years ago to look at restructuring our tax policies and looking at the structural side of the budget, which I still say to this day we didn't get to the second part of it. And I had a lot of people talk to me about in my last session before I ran for treasurer about filing a bill or a resolution to extend it, but I didn't do that. I absolutely believe, though, that now that we have a budget and we have revenue for a while, that we have to concentrate on how do we control growth and structurally fix what's plagued our state. We need stability in our health care, and we need stability in other areas. We can't continue to allow government to grow at a pace that outpaces your personal growth, which generally is around 1%. State government, without any aid from the feds, grows about 9%. That's over a 2-year period. And over that same 2-year period, our total state government grew about 24%. So it's unsustainable, and we'll burn through this cash quicker than you can blink. So I'm going to strongly encourage both the legislature and the executive branch to work very hard. Don't pat each other on the back. We really didn't fix anything other than raise a lot of money. Now we have to fix what I consider to be structurally broken, so we're not right back here a few years from now, and not wait to year 4, 5, and 6. And I'll tell you that one of the reasons we left it at 27 months the last time was to force the legislature to the table with the administration to fix it, and it didn't happen. So 7 years might give us some stability, But one part of me, or a large part of me, believes that this thing's going to go unchecked for the next 4 years, and we're really not going to fix anything. I think when you look at the budgets over the years, we're just finishing a fiscal year where we spent the most money in the history of the state, and only to finish second now to the new fiscal year. We'll spend more money this year in the fiscal year we're in than any other year in the history of our state. So I think we need to take a very hard look at that and delve into some of the big issues and where we spend a lot of money and see how do we structurally fix this thing. There was several bills filed in the session that I supported that would have reformed our pension system, at least the state pension system, and I give a lot of credit to Lasers for taking the lead. That would revamp and have no effect really on any current state employees unless they wanted to opt into the program. I thought that was a very good bill, and I really hope next year that they bring it back, because that has to get done. Our Medicaid program, I think everybody knows we have problems, and it needs some accountability. We have an unsustainable cost in health care. Health care is just sucking up our budget and will continue. And you can read just about everywhere the unpredictability of health care and where we're headed is going to be a problem in the future. And I tell people, one of my favorite sayings now, but it's the truth. I watch government, and I'm in my 11th year now. I've spent 10 years working on the budget issues, and the state tends to live by crisis, from crisis to crisis, and we don't do a whole lot of long-term planning for our future. Everybody sort of deals with today, and I think as a leader, we need to have discussions about not only what we do today and how we pay our bills today, but how we're going to pay our bills 20 years from now. So another year's passed, and I still believe government is growing out of control, and you can't afford it. As a businessman, you know, especially since 2008, really since after Katrina, business in my world hasn't really been the same. We had a real big high right after Katrina, and then it's sort of been down, and now it's just been fluctuating up and down since, in the residential development business and real estate business where I earn my living. My wife runs our construction company now, and she's been doing that for about 4 years. But you know, we have to make very difficult decisions every day, and we typically start with a number and budget behind that number. We as a government tend to spend and then go find the money to support that spending. It's really the opposite of what everybody does in their own personal lives. And I've said this many times, the only place this model works is in government, because it wouldn't work anyplace else. I talk a lot about the debt of the state as the treasurer and as your banker, basically. You know, in the business world, when I go see my banker and I want to do project A, B, or C, the first thing he does is look at my debt and my spending habits before he determines whether or not I'm going to get a loan or not. And I would tell you, I'm going to strongly encourage both sides that we have to get our spending under control. It's not at a healthy level. When you look at how much we're spending this year compared to last, as I said earlier, we're going to spend more money this year than we did last year and then all the years previous. So I think that is one of the biggest issues facing our state. Moody's recently came out with a report that showed that our debt per person or per capita is around $1,600. It's $500 more than the states of Alabama, Arkansas, Georgia, Kentucky, Mississippi, and Tennessee. So we're spending the money, we're just not getting enough of it in. And we've been fortunate, as I tell the rating agencies all the time, having to have a balanced budget come hook or crook, it's happened. Whether I agree with it or not, at the end of the day, our budgets have been balanced, which is required in the Constitution. I would tell you, and that debt is made up, that statistic is made up from our bonds that we borrow and our pension system and related benefits. And that's, again, that's not my report, that comes from Moody's. So where do we go from here? As I said earlier, I think we'll outgrow this cash pretty quick. The penny fell off and came back with 0.45. So we shouldn't get as much money from that sales tax, but we'll see what the economy does, if the economy makes up that difference. But we have a lot of work to do moving forward, which includes pension reform, tax reform, all the things I've mentioned, healthcare spending. One of my pet peeves is capital outlay. We're going to spend about $423 million this year on carrying costs and paying for projects that aren't all priorities to the state of Louisiana. When we're begging and borrowing to get big infrastructure needs taken care of, we're also spending money on things I believe have no business of the state of Louisiana paying for. I think one of the things that we have to improve on as well is increase our savings account, which is, in my opinion, dangerously low. One of the things that happened this past year, that probably one of the more aggravating things that I've seen happen in my 11 years in Baton Rouge, is we had a surplus, everybody knows, of around $122, $123 million. But what story never made it out was that not of that 123, 99 million of it came from the rainy day fund. So at the end of the year, when we had the surplus, instead of putting it back in our savings account, we spent it. I say we, the legislature and the administration spent it, and I differ. I think they should have put the 99 million back in the rainy day, and they did put 31, but it was a net loss of $68 million. The Constitution requires, when you have a surplus, that a certain amount of it has to go to a rainy day. Problem is, it's like taking money from your savings account, putting your checking account, and thinking you had a windfall. And it's smoke and mirrors. So I wish we'd be a little bit more disciplined, a little more conservative on issues like that. So my goal as treasurer is basically to force state government to create better spending habits. Not live from crisis to crisis, and plan for the future. And I will push both the legislative and executive branches to the table to look at ways that we can better spend, get control of our debt. As I tell people, I'm conservative as a business person. My wife and I run our business conservatively, and I tell people all the time, I believe government needs to be more conservative. And I didn't say they needed to be more Republican or they needed to be more Democrat. They need to be more conservative. The dollar bill does not have a D or an R stamped on it. It all spends the same way. I learned in first grade that 1 + 1 is 2, and if you spent 2, you were broke. So that's my sort of simple approach to it. But we have to do better, and I think we will. One of the things that I heard both the governor talk about and the legislator talk about, actually was my last session as a member of the Appropriations Committee, when we submitted a budget that would be about 2% less than what Revenue Estimating Committee projected that we were going to have. And I think that's a very, very healthy and wise thing to do. The governor said back then that he liked the idea, but thought the timing was bad. We had this big cliff that we were facing. Well, the cliff is past us. Now it's time to start doing some things and start saving some money. You can use that money to build up the rainy day, pay down pension, use towards infrastructure projects, but we need to do it. If we don't do it now, we'll never do it. So I'm going to work hard on that issue as well. Well, it was nice to get in front of the media. Session's been over a few weeks, and I'm just sort of cautioning everybody that, yes, we raised revenue and we sort of got rid of this cliff. but we didn't really fix anything. We didn't fix any of the core problems that we have that caused the cliff to begin with. So I just want to work and educate the public. I want to make sure that the legislature and the governor don't sort of forget that we have some problems. And I'm not saying they are. I'm sort of being a little sassy, but we need to go to work. We need to go to work and fix it now. There's no reason to wait 2 years, 3 years. Everybody knows what the problems are, and I think they need to start immediately in fixing those. Well, I think you have to do two things. You have to look at efficiencies first, tax reform, and then budget according to what you have, which we don't do. You know, budget to a number rather than decide what all your needs are, and then go out on the market and try to pay for it. But I want to see efficiencies really combed over well in this state. I mean, weekly somebody calls me about some issue where we're wasting money, and some of it's quite large. So I want to see a better effort on that front.
How does Louisiana's budgeting process differ from those in other states?
Well, look, it's the nature of government. You're sort of always chasing your tail, robbing Peter to pay Paul, however you want to describe it. But I mean, we're not unique in any way from that aspect. You know, Louisiana's biggest problem on our budget is that we have a poor state. We're one of the poorest states. And if we don't create more jobs and figure out a way to educate our poor children so they can grow up and get a job, we're never going to get out of this cycle. You know, when I first got to Baton Rouge 11 years ago, we were told we had to raise the salaries of teachers, that was the reason our public education was so bad. And we were ranked 48th, 49th. And here we are 10, 11 years later, and guess what? The salaries are better than they used to be, but we're still on the bottom. I don't think it's about salaries as much as it is about the climate, being in a poor state, having a lot of poor children, and putting a bigger and bigger burden on the education system. But that costs money. It costs money to have kids that aren't educated, and we need those children educated so they can get jobs and pay taxes.
One of the suggestions that came out of this past legislative session was for a constitutional convention to do some fiscal reform. What your feeling on that?
Look, I go back and forth on this constitutional convention, but I do tell people that you really don't have to have a constitutional convention to fix it. You can file bills and pass bills to undedicate all the money you want. So why not do that? You know, you can go to a convention and open up Pandora's box, and I don't know if the risk is worth it. You know, I think, as an example, it's in the Constitution that you need a 2/3 vote to raise a tax. Well, why the heck would I want to risk getting rid of that? You know, as I told the media earlier today, it's a healthy process. It's a difficult process when you go through what the legislature just did. But there's a reason you have to have a 2/3 vote to raise the tax, because you should have a super majority of the citizens of Louisiana who want to pay more taxes. So I guess in the end, you don't need a convention to fix our problems. You can fix it through a convention, but you may cause more problems.
Your feeling regarding Louisiana's sales tax now?
Well, look, it bothers me as a businessman to know that we have one of the highest sales taxes in the country. And that's just not good to promote your state. I wish they wouldn't have done it for 7 years. I would have kept it short term again and forced people to the table to negotiate and try to figure out this problem and how to fix it. My concern now is, now that they've done it for 7 years, it may be 6 years, 360 days before they agree to something. And this whole time we're sitting here paying the highest sales tax in the state. I get why they did it, and I hear both sides. But you know, at the end of the day, we don't need to keep that sales tax there for 7 years. They can go in and restructure some taxes, restructure some budget things, and get this thing fixed sooner than later.
You mentioned sales tax. The Supreme Court ruling recently is going to allow additional internet sales tax to flow to states. What is the mechanism Louisiana has in place to receive that?
Well, we don't. we don't have a mechanism in place, and I read an article recently that the Department of Revenue was going to work on that and hopefully have something in place sometime in 2019 or the beginning of the 2019 tax season. But we'll see. The feds typically say, one of the things that's long been said, that you have to have a single source collection agent, and we don't have that in Louisiana. We're one of the only states in the nation that, and I hear complaints about it all the time from business that do business in multiple states. We don't have a single source collector, and you have companies that do business in the state of Louisiana. They can write one check to Mississippi, and Louisiana might write 30 or 40. So we'll see. I'm not sure what their game plan is.
What are the initiatives of the Treasurer's Office going forward?
Well, the big initiative we're working in the off season right now is on unclaimed property, and educate the public, because we're getting $80+ million a year coming into the department that isn't getting returned to the owners. This is lost money. This is cash, and that I want to work harder using technology and other means to return it to the citizens of Louisiana. We're going to do a whole new marketing plan. We're going to rebrand it. Nobody knows what unclaimed property means, but we're going to come up with something. But we did pretty good this year. We returned about $5 million more than last year, but I want to increase that quite a bit.
If people have questions like more information, what should they do?
Yeah, they can go to our website at latreasury.com and click on unclaimed property, and you can just punch in your name, and it'll tell you whether you have anything in it or not.